Right, so I think I've met most of you, but there are some unfamiliar people. So I'm Dr. Zach Shields. I'm the owner and doctor of chiropractic at Elite Sport and Spine. We're a chiropractic physical therapy and sports injury clinic. So definitely want to thank Chris for the opportunity to come and present here today. We're going to be going over mobility and stability. So I liked Chris's title of WOD mobility, so I wanted that on the presentation. And I am a member here too. I do have more of a connection here than just coming in to present. But so starting out, mobility. We're going to take a look at what it is, how we lose it, and can it be regained. Can you guys see the pictures okay, or is it kind of tough? Okay. So that's a pretty flexible yoga position. There's no way I could get in that position anymore. My 2-year-old daughters could probably do it, no problem. The next thing we look at is stability. So pretty much same questions, what it is, how we lose it, and how we can get it back. Obviously with CrossFit, there's a huge balance between the two. A lot of the gymnastic stuff take a lot of stability and core strength. Just being able to get in a position like that is pretty crazy. So first of all, taking a look at what it is. So mobility is the ability to move freely and easily. And then stability is defined as the state of being stable, which is an awesome and very explanatory definition if you have no idea what stable is. So stable is not likely to change with that. So, looking at mobility, the ability to move the joints and muscles through a range of motion, and then stability is to have that solid base or that foundation for your movement, so you're not chewing through the joints or straining the muscles by taking them too far. So here's a look at how we lose it. This is an x-ray of someone sitting at a computer, and you can't really see what it says there, but the arrow that's pointing to the neck says forward head posture in the cervical spine. It puts a lot of stress on the muscles at the back of the head, and then also increases the amount of weight that your head has as it comes forward. It just increases the strain on all those neck joints. The arrow pointing to the mid-back there says elongated, inactive, weak upper back muscles with a lot of T-spine curvature. So you see a lot of old people walking around with a cane, they're all walking around like this. Definitely don't want to end up like that someday with a lot of those joint and muscle dysfunctions. And then we have the internally rotated shoulders, bring them in here. A lot of times that can be tight pecs. Then again, when these muscles are contracted, the muscles on the back are overstretched and shut off. A lot of times with sitting, you'll end up with shortened hamstrings, just because the primary activity of the hamstring is to flex that knee up. So when you're in that position, your hamstrings are chronically short. You're sitting in relative hip flexion, so the hip flexors bring that knee forward. When you're sitting all day, those tighten. And then sitting on your butt, you get elongated and weak glutes. So here are some of the top injuries that I see in CrossFit athletes, and I think it was Box Magazine, does that sound right? There's an article in Box Magazine that backed most of these up. I added in IT band syndrome, otherwise the rest were in that article. So low back pain, just with the amount of squats and deadlifts, we see a lot of low back pain, we'll go into that a little bit. Anterior knee pain, if the knee is translating over the foot on a lot of, the squats, the deadlifts, you'll see a lot of anterior knee pain with that. Anterior shoulder impingement, a lot of times that stems from some of the pull-ups or muscle-ups that are involved. And then medial knee pain and anterior knee pain can kind of be tied together, so we'll go into that a little bit more. And then usually the IT band syndrome will be tied into these well. So with the knee pain and the IT band syndrome, a lot of times it just depends kind of what's the weak link in the kinetic chain as to where you feel the pain, but a lot of times it will stem from the same issue. So another thing we're going to look at is motor patterns. So a motor pattern is a coordinated set of movements involving both voluntary and reflex actions, such as going from sitting to standing, or walking, reaching for something, squatting down to pick something up. Typically it's initiated by a voluntary movement and then completed by an involuntary movement. You're able to go through it without conscious control. You think, okay, I'm going to sit down, but you don't say, okay, as I'm sitting down, quads engage, okay, all right, now glutes engage. It's not conscious that way, it's subconscious as you go down. So basically, it's a sequence of muscle firing that you choose to complete a task. A faulty movement pattern can develop through time, and it can rob you of both stability and mobility. So the big kind of overarching theme behind stability is core strength. I'm sure you guys have heard that preached, time and time again, core strength, core strength. You have to have solid core strength before you have good mobility in the extremities. Otherwise, it becomes like firing a cannon from a canoe. If you ever think of firing a cannon from a canoe, you fire, the canoe is going to go backwards, the cannonball is not going to go very far. You need that stable base to have all of your movements from, all those explosive movements. So diaphragm breathing is what activates that core strength. So with diaphragm breathing, you should push out in all 360 degrees. You should be able to activate into the lateral abdominal wall as well as the back wall with breathing. And then a lot of that chest breathing is going to eliminate the core stability, and it's going to compromise mobility in the limbs. So with that chest breathing, where you use your scalenes or a lot of those neck muscles to breathe, you see the person take a deep breath in, they go, the chest comes up. When your chest comes up, you suck in your stomach and you lose all that core stability. So what we want to see is a deep breath in, activate that diaphragm, and you should expand through the lateral walls into the back and that whole 360 degrees. So a couple things that we'll do in the clinic is either put like a TheraBand around someone's waist and have them breathe so they can feel that stretch all the way around. Or if you have a nice comfy pair of sweatpants with the elastic waistband, that whole waistband should expand. It shouldn't just be in the front. And it definitely shouldn't go in at all. You can take that deep breath in. And another main function of the diaphragm is it's the primary stabilizer for the lumbar spine. So basically your abdominals form a canister. So when you take that deep breath in, the diaphragm goes down, which activates the pelvic floor because you're pushing against it. And that whole inner abdominal pressure that you then create with that deep breath in helps to stabilize the lumbar spine so you don't get too much extension or too much flexion out of it and strain a muscle or injure a disc. One of the main compensations that we see in CrossFit athletes, powerlifters, really anyone who's doing any kind of weightlifting, is then dubbed extension compression. So basically what that means is you've lost the ability to breathe with the diaphragm, so you've lost a lot of that spinal stability that way. So you activate the erector spinae, and this picture isn't great in this light anyway, but like he just has huge erectors, like they're just massive. So basically what that does is it puts a lot of tension on the joints in the low back and the discs in the low back, and it can create an injury there. So one of the things that we'll look at when we kind of do some of the breakout stuff is how to shut off that DCSS and activate the deep core stabilizers again, or like the diaphragm, the multifidi in the low back, some of those more deep intrinsic muscles. I do have a little website here, so one of the handouts that I gave you on the Flex Extend is from Athlete Enhancement. This is one of my colleagues that I went to school with, and he now practices in Columbus, Ohio. But he has a lot of really great information. So his website's down at the bottom, but I'll give you a little glimpse of what it is here. So he has a lot of videos and education. He does a lot of speaking, primarily in the Columbus area, but he has some great videos up on his website. So the first one just talks about shutting off that extension compression strategy, and then he has a lot of other ones on here too, abdominal breathing in the quadruped position. This is a link to the workout or exercise that I printed off for you. And he talks about like the hollow position and how to activate that diaphragm, while doing pull-ups. He's really big into CrossFit as well, which is awesome. So he pulls in a lot of that stuff. His box jump progression, proper racing technique, and then lead out to. So if you guys are interested, I would definitely recommend checking out that website. It's got a lot of really good information on it, and the videos are very informative. All right, so again, just going back to kind of how you lose that diaphragm control. A lot of times it comes from sitting. We spend all day sitting at a computer, or we're texting on our phone slumped over. When you bend forward like that, you're compromising the diaphragm. The diaphragm can't expand in this position. So everyone try to slump forward and take a deep breath in using their diaphragm. You can't do it. You have to breathe from your chest. So a lot of times that's how that diaphragm gets shut off. And then we'll go through some ways to reactivate the diaphragm a little bit later. One of the other things that we do to kind of monitor how the motor patterns are working in an individual athlete is functional movement screens. So it's a specific movement that identifies an area of restriction or instability within the kinetic chain. A lot of these go back to the 1950s and 60s when they were first discovering neurology and how a lot of things worked. Looking at which order muscles should fire in to complete a specific task. And then Gary Gray and Gray Cook are two modern physical therapists who've done a lot of this and really developed it into more of a system. So some of the things that we're looking for in functional movement screens are lumbar stability, thoracic mobility, whether you can have good mobility through the shoulders, good stability through the knees, ankle mobility, hip mobility, ankle dorsiflexion, or that ability to, like as you're going down into a squat, to have good motion through the ankles, and then a lot of muscle function. So that's kind of a lot. One of the ones I usually start out with is the deep squat. So just looking at this, some of the big things that jump out at me is a lack of ankle mobility. She's rolling her ankles in a little bit to try to get around that dorsiflexion. Her knees are going to the inside, and she's lacking a lot of mobility through the hips. So we'll break some of these down, break up into groups, and go through everything as well. But this is ideally what we'd like to see from a squat. I stole this off the CrossFit Renegade website, but it's pretty awesome. So we have feet shoulder width apart, weight back on the heels, the crease of the hips is below parallel, the knees are tracking over the feet but not beyond the toes, nice upright torso, strong lumbars, and his head's in a nice neutral position. This is something that we see really typically in babies, toddlers, who just really good motor patterns. No one has to teach an infant how to roll over or how to start crawling. They just do it on their own. It's something that's innate. And one of the techniques that I use is kind of based off child development, taking a look at some of those motor patterns and how babies develop, and then injuries in adults, and going back and seeing where that developmental pattern is broken down over time. So one of the first tests I use, like I said, is the deep squat. I fail this test, so I use one of my friends here. So this would be a very poor one. You can see she's not getting her hips down to parallel at all. We put that stick along the back to try to keep it neutral. It should stay tight against your back. So she's curving through the lumbar spine to try to get down a little bit further, and that stick is coming off the back. Here's a pretty good one. Weight back on the heels, knees tracking over the feet but not past them. And then that stick is nice and straight on her lumbar spine. From there, if we see a lack of hip mobility, a lot of times we'll go to the modified Thomas test. So this is another one of my friends who practices in Des Moines. Basically, you lay on your back, you pull one hip up so you're torquing that pelvis a little bit, and you're just checking for hip flexor and quad tightness. So ideally, what we'd like to see is that hip parallel to the table, and then the knee and that leg hanging down at 90 degrees. I think he was just demonstrating this. I don't think he's actually that tight, but a lot of psoas or hip flexor tightness here is keeping that knee up, not down the parallel, and then a lot of quad tightness is not allowing the knee to get soft. From there, if there is a dysfunction in that squat pattern and modified Thomas looked okay, we would go into the 6-inch step down. So basically what this looks at is a lot of ankle mobility and then calf tightness. So what we want to see is, again, that knee staying straight over the toes. We don't want to see it going to the inside at all. And then from the side, the other thing we'd be looking for is whether you're able to keep your heel on the ground, or if that heel comes up, kind of indicating tight calves. Wall angel is a screen for the upper thoracic spine. So going back to that deep squat where she started to lean forward, she's obviously lacking some extension through that thoracic spine to be able to get back. So what we have to do for this one is just stand against the wall, bring your arms up to 90 degrees, and then slide down the wall, keeping your hands where they're at. So it's checking both shoulder and thoracic mobility, but this one's focused a little bit more on the thoracic spine. And then we have the T4 extension test, which is actually checking more shoulder motion than thoracic motion. So I'm not exactly sure why it's called the T4 test, but that's what they named it. So again, here we're just looking for One, the ability to get that shoulder up, just see if there's any lat tightness or anterior impingement going on that isn't allowing you to get that shoulder all the way up to 180 degrees. And then the next thing that we're checking for is the ability to keep the lumbar spine flat against the wall. So a lot of times if you lack thoracic mobility or shoulder mobility, in order to get up, you'll extend that low back to try to get back a little further. So that's one compensation that we look for that would indicate either thoracic or shoulder tightness. And then we'll go through some shoulder mobility stuff as well, but you can see, like especially with an overhead squat, how important it becomes to be able to get those shoulders up without hyperextending the lumbar spine, especially once you have weight on the bar. That extension of the lumbar spine even goes back to that extension compression pattern where you're just putting way too much strain on the muscles and joints of the lower back. Another test that we do looking for shoulder mobility is the quadruped rock test. So basically this is looking for scapular stability. I don't know how well you can see this, but you could pretty much fit your whole hand under his shoulder blade there. It's just there's no stability there, it's winging way up. So a lot of times if that scapula wings way up like that, it can be a lack of shoulder mobility. So again, if that glenohumeral or the true shoulder joint doesn't move enough, you're going to try to steal it from somewhere else, and in this case, he's taking it from the scapula. So what do you do if you fail one of these tests? I like Kelly a lot, Dr. Kelly from Mobility WOD. I don't know how many of you are familiar with him. He has a lot of he has a lot of great stuff. He has a book called Supple Leopard, which is a great place to start. He's a physical therapist and really big into CrossFit as well, so that's a great combination there. But this is one of my favorite quotes from him, is all human beings should be able to perform basic maintenance on themselves. So that's what we'll go into a little bit now. We'll break up into partners and go through the tests a little bit later on, just to see where you're at, and then we'll go through some of the mobility things that I'm going to show you. So self-treatment. There's some pretty basic and easy things that you can do to make sure that you're maintaining good mobility and good stability. And the exercise sheet that I handed out focuses more on the stability part. What we're going to be looking at now is a little bit more of that mobility part. So stretching. Stretching is huge, it's so important, but so many people just kind of go through the motions on it. And actually using some different assistance to get a little bit deeper stretch can be really helpful. So I don't know how well you can see this picture here, but he has a band tied to a pole, and it's just below his glute, which is really pulling that hip into a lot of extension to get a deeper stretch on the psoas. Here's a great picture of a foam roller, and I stole this one from Chris too. He had this up on the website to sign up for the class. So, we'll go through some of these as well as some self-PIR exercises. PIR stands for post-isometric relaxation. So basically you're firing the muscle just enough to get kind of that neural response. You get a little bit of contraction out of it, and then you're consciously relaxing it just to kind of reset the tone of the muscle. Especially in a muscle that is chronically tight, that helps just kind of relax it so you get a better stretch out of it. And then again, strengthening exercises. So when it comes to strengthening the low back or the core, no one has done more research on this than Stu McGill. I don't know how you can see this, but he also has a very sweet mustache. That's why I like putting this picture up on the presentation. But he has published, I think, over 50 research articles, as well as 2 books, and written chapters and numerous other books, just looking at back performance, especially in high-end athletes, CrossFit athletes, and a lot of weightlifters, just how to avoid back injuries in that population. And then the other thing that's really important is hip and glute strength. Again, going back to that person who's sitting at the computer with the long, weak glutes, just strengthening those glutes. They're your engine for a lot of stuff. That's where you get a lot of that explosive hip extension from, is the glutes. So if you're sitting all day and you have tight hip flexors and weak glutes, when you're doing some of the snatch stuff, you're not going to be able to get that explosive hip extension that you need to get up. Some other preventative treatments, I had to throw this in because, hey, I'm a chiropractor. So, chiropractic care, Graston technique, active release technique, kinesiotaping, physical therapy, dry needling, massage therapy, all those ways are great things that you can do just to kind of stay active. And going back to what Kelly had to say before, you know, everyone should be able to perform basic self-maintenance stuff, but every once in a while it's a good idea, you know, just to get everything checked out, just to make sure. I usually go see one of my friends once every 3 months, just to make sure everything's functioning well, and even, you know, with my base of knowledge, I'm not missing something glaring that, you know, just having another set of eyes looking at you can help point out. Another big thing is triplanar stretching. So a lot of times, you know, we stretch a muscle and it's always in the sagittal plane, or that straight forward, straight back. You know, you go to stretch a quad or hip flexor and it's always right here. So one of the things we'll go over is triplanar stretching. So especially with CrossFit or really any type of you know, athletic event, you're not always running straight forward, straight back. There are side-to-side movements, there are rotational movements involved. So just stretching those muscles in all 3 planes of motion becomes really important. So the boring part's over. We'll get into the active part now. So there's some of my references, and there's the research support. If anyone's interested in any of this, just let me know. I can definitely get that material for you. So let's get moving. So I threw this picture out just real quick, one more thing. Just because, again, with that cross crawl pattern, where you have, you know, one leg out, one leg back, that takes an incredible amount of core stability to kind of maintain that position. And then with that core stability comes more of that limb mobility, where you can actually move your arms and legs from that solid base.